Turn on the mics. Turn on the video. Woohoo! We're ready to go.
All right.
Got my standings board updated behind me.
Yeah, it's now down to to basically one team in each league.
Yep, pretty much.
That's really all it is now. And we can talk about it in the show, but what's your take on John Tavares?
Yeah, interesting story.
Now, he can say that he hasn't really thought about it until now because there really was no reason to think about it until now, and some people might believe that.
Yep.
But I think if you're happy where you are, you'd have made a decision before now.
Yeah, and I think he's going to be on. I think he's going to leave, but we can talk about that.
I think Carlson, you probably won't see anything this year on Carlson, and that wouldn't surprise me if we go through the whole summer and here we are starting the league next year and he hasn't signed. That's it's not a big surprise.
Yeah.
But Tavares not signing up till now is. Because basically they have him for 65, 70 days. And then they get nothing for him.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, they'll try to. If he determines that he doesn't want to stay there, they'll try to get something for him.
Yeah.
All right, let's get going here. All right, you ready?
Ready to roll.
All right. Hello and welcome to the Hockey Nuts podcast, season 2, episode 30. Episode 76 overall. We had 75 last week. So My name's Wayne. I'm here once again with Steve. How's it going today?
I'm doing good, Wayne. I think it's podcast 31, but I'm not.
I might have that wrong. Yeah. I think it was 30 last week, wasn't it?
I think so, but I'm not. Don't rely on me on something like that.
So yeah, you're right. It is 31. I made a mistake, but anyway, we're deep in the regular season here. This is the last week of the regular season. There's actually only 5 days left in the regular season.
5 days. Yep.
So
and really, the 8th really is just it's a game. It'd be kind of like everything is tied and tiebreakers, and they play the extra game in the American League Series, or they have that one game playoff type thing. That's really what it is.
Well, it's just a makeup game from a game that was canceled earlier in the year. So the season actually should have ended on Saturday, but it won't. There's one more game on Sunday, and that's the Boston-Florida game that was canceled earlier in the year due to weather. And so we're coming right down to it, and I'm getting very excited for the playoffs.
Yes.
So, regardless of whether or not your team is in, I'm sure most fans out there are as well. So let's get going. But first things first, we need to recap the week, and starting with our 3 favorite teams, which are, of course, Boston, Carolina, and the Rangers. And we can go ahead and start with Boston first, since they had the busiest schedule of the week. Carolina and Rangers each had 3 games on the week, and Boston had 4. So Boston going into the week was, 2 games in hand on just about everybody else in the Eastern Conference. And they made up at least one of those games anyway this week. Going back to the 29th, they had a game against Tampa Bay and came out with a hard-fought, well-earned 4-2 win in that one. That was a home game for Boston, and it was just probably one of the more complete games that Boston has played all year. They just went out there and they refused to get beat by Tampa Bay. And with that win, they officially took first place in the Atlantic Division, and knocking Tampa Bay off for the first time since somewhere around mid-October. Tampa had been sitting atop the Atlantic Division, and Boston finally got the better of Tampa Bay and now sit atop. Of course, they've kind of been trading places since then all week long. Boston get a win, they jump up above Tampa Bay, and the next night Tampa Bay get a win, Tampa gets first place. So they've been kind of flip-flopping all week long. But anyway, they first gained that spot back on the 29th. Then in the next game was a 5-1 win against Florida on the 31st. And I think this was the first major nail in Florida's coffin, in my opinion. Florida needed to come out. They obviously need the points more than Boston does at this point because they were fighting for a playoff spot, and they were right in it, and they needed this win against Boston in order to stay relevant in the race, and they got completely blown out of the Garden that night. So Florida's playoffs hopes took a serious beating with that game, along with the game itself. And then in the next game was Sunday, the very next day. Boston flew down to Philadelphia to play the Flyers, and they ended up basically stealing a point in that game because they were down 2-0 most of the game. Then in the third period, they scored to make it 2-1, and then with about a second and a half left in regulation, they scored a goal to tie the game and send it to overtime. And that one was pretty much, I know Flyers fans are still swearing at Wayne Simmons for what he did. He kind of olayed or one-handed, or he had the opportunity with a few seconds left in the period. He had the opportunity to get the puck out of Philadelphia's zone with the Bruins buzzing, and he failed to do so. The Bruins kept it in and managed to get it on net and managed to put it in to tie the game at 3-3 with about a second and a half left in regulation. And then the game goes to overtime, and then Philadelphia ended up winning the game with an overtime goal on Hudobin. So, like I said, Bruins steal a point out of that one. They really didn't deserve a point in that game. And then the final game of the week was a game at Tampa Bay on the 3rd. That was last night, because we are here recording on the 4th, Wednesday the 4th. And that one, I didn't see that game because I was at the rink reffing last night, but we were keeping tabs on it as the night went on, and rather disappointing result. It was one of those games where Boston really could have almost, I don't think they could have clinched the division title last night, but they certainly could have made it almost impossible for Tampa Bay to come back. They would have gone up by 4 points with Tampa Bay only having 2 games left to play. So, but it went the other way. Boston ended up losing, and it was a 4-0 loss. Boston really didn't play all that well from the highlights that I saw. Tampa Bay came out with their probably most complete game that, by anyone's standards anyway, one of their most complete games of the year. And Tampa Bay came out. They knew they had to win that one to maintain any chance of winning the division. And they came out and put together a really good game despite not having Steven Stamkos playing that night. And Tampa Bay comes out with the 4-0 win in that one. But, a couple of factors in that. Of course, Tampa Bay needed the points more than Boston. It was a home game for Tampa Bay. And Boston, that was their 4th game in 6 nights. So I don't know if Boston was just tired or what the deal was in that game. But ultimately ended up a 4-0 loss to Tampa Bay on that one. So that makes the Bruins finish at 2-1-1 on the week. But they still technically are in first place. They're tied with Tampa Bay right now at 100 and I think it's 110 points, something like that. And but Boston has a game in hand still on Tampa Bay. They've got 3 games left. Tampa Bay only has 2. And 2 of the 3 games that Boston's playing is against Florida. Florida is just about eliminated at this point. They're still technically alive in the playoff push, but they're going to need a miracle to overcome their deficit. So, and we'll talk about the standings in a minute. But so they've got 2 against Florida and 1 against Ottawa. So, and that'll be a Erik Karlsson-less Ottawa because we'll talk about his story coming up.
Yes.
In that he won't be playing the last couple games of their season for the rest of this year. So that was Boston's week. So
yes, the Rangers, Wayne, are pretty much in. I wouldn't say that they're in the doldrums. I would just say that if they don't start out well, I don't see a sense of urgency in their game. They're going to study and tweak and move players around and try to highlight players and whatnot. And that definitely happened at the Tampa Bay game when we fell behind. I think it was 4-0. We were down in that game, but we came back a little bit. But there's no pressure on the Rangers. The season ends in 2 games for them, and there wasn't a real. I think if they get a poor start, they get a poor start, and it's not that's how it goes. In the Carolina game, however, we were there, and there was a reason to play that game. There really was. I think it was to eliminate Carolina, and so Henrik came into that game with a mindset on doing just that, and that's what he did. He played very well in that game. And we wound up beating Carolina 2-1, although it was a close game and firmly contested. I was glad with that win. And again, last night with the Devils, in the first 10 minutes of the game, the Devils went up 3-0. Two goals on power plays. Once that happened, I don't think that the fight was in the Rangers there to try and come back in that game and pull up even. I just think that was another situation where Vigneault maybe tweaked some lines. There was he didn't pull Henrik when they scored their 5th goal. He kept him in. There's really no reason to pull him. So that's the type of thing that's going on now. There's 2 more games. If they're able to pull off a winner in 1 or 2 of them. I know Andre Pavlik is starting in the next game tomorrow night against the Islanders. I don't know whether Henrik will play the final game of the season, but I think the Rangers are in that type of a mode right now. So we went 1-2 on the week, and we're sitting right now at 77 points, 1 point ahead of the Islanders.
Yep.
In 7th place in the Metro.
Yep. And as for Carolina, they had kind of it's one of those weeks, Carolina. Well, officially they got eliminated this week, but they've been realistically out of the playoffs for a couple of weeks now. But they had a game going back to the 30th. They had a 4-1 win at Washington. And Darling, I believe, played net in that one. And, of course, a lot of the comments from the Hurricanes fans right now is, they're giving Darling a whole lot more playing time than they had been before. And he's actually been playing fairly well. But the general sentiment among Carolina fans is, of course he's playing well. The games don't mean anything. There's no pressure.
Right.
But regardless, they're playing him a lot more than they had been, and obviously they got to get his head issues, or I continue to say that the issues with Darling is in his head, not so much with his playing ability, and they need to work those issues out. And giving him extra playing time is, at this time of year when the games don't really count for them anymore, is actually a good thing for him and the Canes if he can work his way through it. But anyway, he gets the win in Washington on the 30th in a game that really didn't mean much to either team. Carolina kept their playoff hopes alive with that game. because they could have been eliminated with a loss in that one. Washington has pretty much clinched the Metro division at this point. I can't remember if they had clinched at that point or not. I don't think they had quite yet, but they were on their way anyway. And then they had the Ranger game, which they lost 2-1, and that did officially eliminate them from the playoff contention. However, even if Carolina had won that game, they would have been eliminated anyway because New Jersey also played on that night and they won their game. So It was one of those cases where in order for Carolina to stay alive that night, Carolina needed to win in regulation and New Jersey needed to lose in regulation. And if either one went to overtime, Carolina would have been eliminated. Or if the games would have gone the other way, the Canes would have been eliminated either way, whether New Jersey won or Carolina won. That would have eliminated them as well. But bottom line was Carolina lost. New Jersey did, in fact, win their game that night. So that eliminated them completely from playoff contention on that night. So then on the 2nd was their next game. They had a game in Florida against the Florida Panthers. Of course, Florida is still technically alive, so they were playing for a lot more than Carolina was at that point. And Florida came out with the 3-2 win in that one. So Carolina's season will end here in a couple of days, as will the Rangers. But they're getting a look at a lot of their younger players at this point. This is a time of year where teams that are eliminated from playoff contention have a bunch of their players that have been battling bumps and bruises will actually put themselves on the injured list, partially so that they don't have to continue playing hurt and start healing to get ready for next year. But the other major advantage for teams in that case is it gives them the opportunity to free up roster spots for some of their younger guys coming up. And Carolina's been doing that with a number of their players, given a number of their Charlotte players a chance to play in Raleigh. So yeah, this will be the 9th straight year that Carolina misses the playoffs, and we're getting sick and tired of seeing it here because, it's not the best way to sell hockey to the fans in this area if you continue to miss the playoffs. And Florida is kind of in the same boat. They've been struggling with attendance, even though they're still in the thick of the playoff hunt. I've seen a lot of empty seats in their games in recent weeks. Yep. So,
yeah, Florida. You can say what you want to about Carolina in this area not being and I've heard it from on podcasts, and I've heard it. Carolina's not you've heard it before too, Wayne. Yep. It's a lackluster place as far as the NHL goes, and it's hockey seats are easy to get and open and et cetera, et cetera. But I really believe Florida has a much tougher time than the Hurricanes do. Yep. I have watched Panthers games before where there have been just vacant sections with no fans. Now, I haven't watched a lot of their games this year, but I've seen that before, where they have had terrible time trying to sell tickets in Miami. And like you say, here they are. They've got 3 games left. They stand a realistic chance. I guess we're going to talk about that. They're the only team that can get in now in the East. And I would think that every game would be a sellout.
But they're not.
But I don't know if that's the case or going to be the case for those 3 games. I wagered a bet, and I'm not a betting man, that I could get in my car and drive down to Miami and buy a ticket for the next home game if there is one. And I bet I could get one.
Yep, there actually is one because Boston's in town Thursday night against Florida. Yep. So, but yeah, let's take a look at those standings real quick. Of course, Washington has, in fact, clinched the Metropolitan Division. They earned that Y next to their name, and they are sitting at 103 points. Pittsburgh is second with 96 points, and Columbus is third, also at 96 points. But officially, Pittsburgh has clinched a playoff spot. Columbus has not, although Columbus will clinch one with their next point, or Florida not getting 2 points in basically all
Every
of
game.
every game that they've got left.
Florida has to win out.
So Columbus is basically on the verge of clinching at this point.
Columbus is all but in.
Yeah.
They need 1 point.
Yep. Yeah, and the only reason they haven't clinched is if Florida were to win out and Columbus were to lose out. Florida would overtake them by having more regulation or overtime wins. That's essentially how it would happen. So actually, it's not even Florida that can pass them. It's either Philadelphia or New Jersey would be one of the teams that would knock them out. So anyway,
but Florida and Columbus would have to lose out in regulation.
Yeah, they'd have to lose their last 2 games in regulation.
Yeah.
Their next point they'll clinch, and they're 8-1-1 in their last 10. So I don't expect it to take long.
Yeah.
So in the Atlantic, you've got Boston sitting at 110 points, and Tampa Bay also at 110 points. Boston technically holds the number 1 spot, even though they have fewer regulation overtime wins. And Toronto is sitting at 3rd with 103. And the reason that Boston does hold that number 1 spot is the NHL basically shows teams tied in points. Whoever has the fewest games played gets the edge in the standings.
Right.
Until, the season is over and everybody's played the same amount of games, then regulation overtime wins is the next tiebreak. So Boston technically is in 1st, Tampa's in 2nd, Toronto in 3rd, and Toronto's locked into that 3rd spot. They're not going anywhere. They're 7 points back of the 2nd place team, and they're 13 points ahead of the 3rd place or the 4th place team in Florida. So Toronto is officially going to be the number 3 seed in the Atlantic Division no matter what happens. So their games truly don't matter one bit the rest of the way.
Right.
The 2 wildcard teams right now are New Jersey sitting at 95 and Philadelphia sitting at 94. And the only team that is on the outside looking in that can get in is Florida. They're at 90. They're 4 points back, and Florida has 3 games to play. So they essentially need to win all 3 games in order to. Two of those 3 are against Boston.
Yeah, I believe that the Devils are in if they get 1 point. They own the tiebreaker against Florida, if I'm not mistaken.
They will. Yep.
So if the Devils win a game in overtime or regulation, they're in.
Or just get a point.
If they get a point in any game, they're in.
Yep.
So
now, of course, New Jersey only has 2 left. So
New Jersey only has 2 left. They only have to get a point in one of those 2 games. With Philadelphia, now I'm not sure on that. If Philadelphia wins one of their remaining 2 games, they have, in regulation or overtime, they have a 39 as their total. So, and 96 points. Florida would have to win out, and I don't know that they would still hold the tie. Well, no, if Florida won out, they would, unless every game is in the shootout, they would overtake the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah, Florida needs a miracle.
They do. If the Flyers now, Philadelphia's got to win a game.
Yep.
That would really put the pressure on Florida. I think the Devils and Columbus are in a much, much better and easier and less stressful position because all they have to do is get a point or Florida has to screw up. Philadelphia really needs to win a game.
Yep.
Because if Florida can pull off 2 victories, the home game against Boston and beat Buffalo, I believe they're playing Buffalo in their other game. If they can pull off a victory in against Boston in one of the 2 they play and then beat Buffalo, they may win. I think they own the tiebreaker then against Philadelphia, and they would get in.
Yep. And
Philadelphia would not. So Florida really, basically, I guess what I'm saying is Florida really only has a chance to be the last wild card. They cannot be the premium wild card team.
Probably not.
And Philadelphia needs to win one.
Yep. Probably not. So, yeah. Yeah, it's down to it. I mean, there's 2 games left for most teams. A few teams have 3. Nobody has 4. So it's getting right down to it. Most of the games are being played tomorrow night. That's Thursday, and Saturday night. Saturday night it's a full 15-game slate. So 30 of the 31 teams will be playing Saturday.
Right.
And then Friday's a light night, and then of course tonight is only 3 games. I think Friday night is like 4 games. So yeah, Thursday and Saturday are nights to watch your favorite team's final games for the vast majority of the league. All right, let's move out west, where we have Nashville at 113, Winnipeg at 110, and Minnesota at 98. Those are your top 3 in the Central Division. Nobody's clinched the division yet there. In the Pacific, Vegas has clinched the division. They're at 109. San Jose is currently second at 98. And Los Angeles is sitting in third at 96. Vegas and San Jose are both clinched in the playoffs. And in the Central, Nashville, Winnipeg, Minnesota are all clinched playoff spots. So LA is the only top 3 team out west that has not yet clinched. And that is because in the wild card, Anaheim is just 1 point back at 95, and Colorado is sitting at 3 points back at 93. And then on the outside looking in, the only team left standing there is St. Louis. They're at 92 with just a few games remaining. Dallas has actually officially been eliminated. They got eliminated either last night or the night before. But they are officially eliminated, even though they're only 3 points back of Colorado for the last wild card spot. It kind of looked confusing to me at first, showing that Dallas is officially eliminated. That is because St. Louis and Colorado play each other before the end of the season. So one of those 2 teams is going to get 2 points no matter what.
Right.
And because of that, Dallas falls behind both of them in the tiebreak. So because of that, that now means that no matter what happens, Dallas cannot pass both St. Louis and Colorado.
Very
and that's what would have to happen. Dallas has to pass them both.
Right.
But it's impossible for them to pass both because they play each other, meaning one of those 2 teams is going to get 2 points.
Very interesting.
That game. So, and there may be a third point in there too. If that game goes to overtime, that would make it even worse. So Dallas, even though they're 3 points out with 2 games to play, are officially eliminated from playoff contention. So St. Louis is now the only team on the outside looking in that has a shot getting in. And they, I think in this case, Anaheim and LA are definitely in. Anaheim is 3 points above St. Louis with 3 to play. Anaheim would have to collapse to make to get eliminated from the playoffs at this point. I think it's going to end up being. I think Colorado falls out. I think in this case they only have 2 games left.
Yeah.
St. Louis has 3, so just in the game in hand alone, St. Louis can pass Colorado. If both teams, it's impossible for both teams to win all the remaining games because again they play each other. So.
Right.
So I think Colorado falls out. However, the game that they play each other, I think is going to determine who gets in and who gets out.
And when is that game? That's not the next game, right? It's the game after that.
I can't remember when that game. It's either Thursday or Saturday night, I believe. Let me look.
I think it's Colorado's last game.
Yeah, maybe Saturday. It may be the last game of the season. So basically, the playoffs start for both these teams Saturday.
Yep.
They play each other 7 p.m. Eastern. No, 7 p.m. Mountain.
I
7 p.m.
look at
Mountain,
it this way. Colorado really has to win out because St. Louis has 3 games left.
Yep.
So if St. Louis were to beat Colorado and Colorado had, let's say they won their previous game, they'd have 95 points, and there's St. Louis at 94 with a game in hand.
Yep.
So they'd only be 1 point behind, I think St. Louis would be sitting in very good position, particularly the way they've been playing lately.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're right. Colorado has to win both their games
Yep.
to finish the season. So if they win Thursday night, going into Saturday, a game against St. Louis will probably win at least one of the other two games that they play. You're going to be looking at essentially what comes down to a one-game playoff for that 8th spot.
Right.
In the Western Conference. So, if that does happen, if it comes down to it, and we should know by Saturday morning, that Colorado St. Louis game is going to be the game of the day to watch because
absolutely,
because the winning team will be in, the losing team will be out of the playoffs. So, and then as for go ahead.
And that is absolutely correct. Saturday evening at
be 9 Eastern.
It is the 9 Eastern game. St. Louis plays Colorado for all the marbles, unless Colorado drops a game here, unless Colorado loses because they're playing San Jose.
Yep.
So that they have to play their best. But they've been a fun team to watch, and it's going to be interesting. I don't know who I'd pull for in that game, Colorado or St. Louis. I guess Colorado with 48 points last year, for them to be sitting there here with 2 games to play and almost to get in the playoffs, that's pretty remarkable. So,
yep. Sure is.
Good for them.
Yep. So, yeah, and then as for all the other teams we didn't mention, Carolina, Rangers, Islanders, Detroit, Montreal, Ottawa, Buffalo are all way out of the playoff contention. And in the West, Calgary, Chicago, Edmonton, Vancouver, Arizona are all out. Although Arizona has been playing very well of late.
Yeah.
They're getting a lot of press around the league. 6-4 in their last 10. So they're actually not even the last place team anymore in the NHL. There's like 3 or 4 teams behind them now.
Yeah.
So with each win, Arizona is making their chances lower of winning the draft lottery. But the way the draft lottery is set up, you can't count on that anyway because more than likely, even if you finish dead last, you're not going to win the draft lottery.
Right.
So, okay. I guess that's it about standings, unless you have anything else you want to add to it.
No, that's good. We hit it well.
All right, let's move on to injuries. Actually, transactions. I didn't see any major transactions this week. Any players signing to like we did last week. We had Chara extending his contract for another year. But we did have a number of college and junior players signing with their respective teams. Going back to March 29th, Daniel Brickley signed with the Kings. Josh Anderson signed with the Avs. Travis Barron also signed with Colorado. Eric Foley signed with St. Louis. Michael Easymont signed with L.A. Marcus Nudavara signed with Columbus. Eli Tolvanen signed with Nashville, and I believe he's playing at the NHL level. Actually, Nudavara was a re-signing. That wasn't a junior player. He already had a contract, and he just signed a 4-year extension worth $2.7 per year. So he's clearly playing at the NHL level for Columbus. As far as entry levels, Sheldon Rempel signed with L.A. Cal Foote signed with Tampa Bay, and he's a highly touted defenseman prospect. I believe that's Adam Foote's kid. Tanner Genot signed with Nashville. Marian Studnik signed with New Jersey. Nicholas Westerholm signed with Nashville. Lucas Radel signed with San Jose. Alexander Schmelvetsky. Did I say that right? Schmelvsky. It's a tough name. He signed with San Jose. And Brian Pinho has signed with the Caps. Most of those players are going to head down to their American Hockey League franchise to play out the rest of the year, particularly if their American League franchise is heading to the playoffs. But those are names to keep in mind if you, or to look out for to see if they play here in the playoffs. So a number of those signings were with playoff teams. But I don't expect a playoff team at this point with only a couple games left to sign a guy and put him in their lineup to start the playoffs. Right. So that ship's already sailed. Those players have already been signed and are already playing for their NHL team if they have any intention of playing them in the playoffs. Most of these guys are going to head down to the minor leagues to help with their AHL playoff runs. All right. Now let's move on to injuries. And we need to start with Brandon Carlo.
Yes.
He is out for the rest of the regular season and playoffs. 21-year-old defenseman will need 3 to 4 months to recover from surgery on his left ankle, which he fractured on Saturday against the Florida Panthers. Carlo was removed from the ice on a stretcher during the third period of a 5-1 win after falling awkwardly along the boards. Carlo had 6 assists and was plus 10 with an average of 19-14 of ice time in 76 games. He played 82 games last season, his first in the NHL. So, second-year defenseman. He's kind of turning into a stay-at-home guy, at least for the start of his career. He hasn't quite developed the offensive prowess that Bruins were hoping that he would have, but it's still early. Like I said, it's only his second year, but I saw this injury. I saw him basically make his ankle go in a direction that it's not designed to go, and unfortunately, the Bruins have lost him for the playoff run. It's going to be a big loss because he was playing in the top 4 for most of the year, usually paired up with, last year he was paired up with Chara all year. And then McAvoy took that spot until McAvoy got hurt. And then Carlo kind of went back into that role. But anyway, it's going to be a big loss for the Bruins, but the Bruins have set themselves up to make it so it won't be that big of a loss because they have 9 NHL defensemen on their roster. So now this just puts them down to 8. So, they've still got plenty of guys that they can call to in relief. And it's too bad that he won't be able to help them in the playoffs, but at the same time, it's next man up mentality for the Bruins. So, right. And the timing of it was perfect because McAvoy is now back. He played his first game, I think, last night against Tampa. Was his first game back from his knee injury. So, right. So yeah, that is all I have to say about that injury. All right, Cam Fowler will be out 2 to 6 weeks for the Ducks because of a shoulder injury. The 26-year-old defenseman was injured during the third period of a 4-3 overtime win against the Avalanche on Sunday and is likely to miss at least the Western Conference first round should Anaheim qualify for the playoffs. Fowler has 32 points in 67 games and leads the Ducks on average ice time at 24:51. He's the only Ducks defenseman to average more than 2 minutes per game on the power play and on the penalty kill. This is a huge loss for Anaheim.
Yeah, that is, and he's a great defenseman for them. So gosh, I don't know how to say that. He's definitely top 3 defenseman for them.
Yep.
So to be without Cam Fowler it's kind of like Boston being without their number 3 guy or number 2 guy.
It'd be like taking Chara out at this point.
It'd be like taking a guy in your top pairing or the best guy in your second pairing and removing him. So that's a major injury.
And with Anaheim, if they get in, they're gonna get in at the skin of their teeth and have to play probably either Vegas or who's leading the Central. But anyway, it's going to be a tough draw for Anaheim in the first round of the playoffs. And to have to try to win a series without him is going to be tough. And then
it's not going to be Winnipeg, so it has to be Nashville.
Nashville and Vegas, that's right. So yeah, that's a tough draw.
Probably played Nashville.
Yeah, tough draw for Anaheim for for that first round. And if they happen to get by, then they get him back, and that'll be a huge boost to their team. But I just don't see him getting out of the first round this year. But something weird always happens in the playoffs.
That's right.
The series never go a way we expected them. All right, next injury. Steven Stamkos did not play for the Lightning against the Bruins on Tuesday because of a lower body injury. The 28-year-old center left a 4-1 loss to the Predators on Sunday at 3:25 of the second period after getting tangled with Predators forward Austin Watson. Lightning coach John Cooper on Monday said Stamkos is day-to-day. He's second on the Lightning with 86 points behind his line mate Nikita Kucherov, who has 97. So I'm sure Stamkos will be back for the playoffs. So this is not a real big deal, at least for the Lightning fans out there. If Stamkos does in fact start missing playoff games, though, even when he comes back, he probably won't be 100%, because in playoffs guys tend to play hurt. So just to get him in there.
Right.
All right, another big loss for another team. Ryan Suter is out the rest of the season for the Minnesota Wild with a fractured right ankle. A 33-year-old defenseman was injured during a 4-1 loss to the Stars on Saturday. He'll have surgery at a date yet to be determined. Defenseman Carson Soucy made his NHL debut in replacing Suter. The 23-year-old was a fifth-round pick by the Wild in the 2013 NHL draft. Minnesota is also without defenseman Jared Spurgeon with a hamstring injury, and Gustav Olofsson, who has a concussion. So the Wild is kind of stumbling into the playoffs here, and they're kind of looking like the way Boston did last year going into the playoffs. A number of injuries back on D, and it ultimately killed Boston's playoff run. And I think it's going to do the same to Minnesota. It's going to make it difficult for them to win.
Right.
You got to have a strong core defenseman to win this day and age. All right, we got a Rangers one. Jesper Fast is out for the remainder of the regular season for the Rangers. Coach Alain Vigneault said on Monday. Fast, a forward, has a groin injury. Matt Zuccarello, also a forward, is having an MRI for undisclosed injury and also did not play on Tuesday. He leads the Rangers with 52 points and will enter the final season of a 4-year contract next season. He blocked a couple of shots the last couple of games, Vigneault said about Zuccarello. He's having a tough time walking right now. Fast, who's 26, has 33 points in 71 games, including 12 points in his past 12. So, not that they're, I can't really call these huge losses for the Rangers because their games really don't matter at this point. But
no, they don't. And I hope that for Zuccarello's sake that he's not seriously hurt, but it's nothing for them to keep him out of the lineup. They did it last night. Neither one of those players played, and it's that way for the rest of the season, basically. If you're looking to watch Zuccarello play again this year, it might not happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and it, getting a couple block shots, probably the worst case scenario with block shots would be maybe a broken foot, which in that case he should be back in time for the start of next season.
Right.
Because he did say he's having tough time walking, which would tell me it's something wrong with the ankle or foot.
Right.
All right, Scotty Upshall is out indefinitely for the Blues with a left kidney laceration. The 34-year-old forward is injured in a 6-0 loss to the Coyotes on Saturday. He played the past 2 games after missing 10 with an MCL strain. So Upshall having a rough go of it here towards the end of the season. And it may not matter with the Blues. I think the Blues are going to end up on the outside when it's all said and done. It is what it is. Kidney laceration. I don't know how that happens playing hockey.
Yeah. The only thing I can think is that you're slashed in the back region pretty severely.
Yeah, you'd have to be hit pretty hard to.
And it lacerates the kidney.
Yep.
All
right. Anyway.
Unless you're like a dirty player and you decide to punch the guy while he's against the boards in the kidney.
Yeah.
That's another way.
Yeah.
But
All right, Michael Neuwirth is day-to-day for the Flyers with a lower body injury. The 30-year-old goaltender was injured in the second period of a 2-1 victory against the Avalanche on Wednesday. He made 10 saves before he was replaced by Peter Mrazek. Neuwirth is 9-7-3 with a 2.6 goals against average and .915 save percentage this season. Alex Leon was recalled from Lehigh Valley, the American Hockey League, on Saturday under emergency conditions. So I think if Philadelphia gets in the playoffs, goaltending is going to be their Achilles heel, and seems like a broken record for Flyers fans. It's always goaltending with them, but they can't seem to keep goaltenders healthy,
Right.
or playing consistently well.
Although Mason has,
I don't see the Flyers going on a deep playoff run this year.
Yeah.
Until they solve their goaltending, and they have options. They've got a couple of young prospects that they've yet to bring up into the system that they can that are going to eventually take over the nets for Philly. But as for this season, I think that is going to be their undoing, is their goaltending once they head into the playoffs. All right, good. We're on to suspensions and fines.
I only saw a couple, Wayne.
Yeah, there was a couple this week. And you know what? I should leave this name right in the show notes permanently, because it seems every week this guy is getting a fine or a suspension of some kind. And, of course, most fans know who I'm talking about, and that's Boston Bruins forward Brad Marchand. He got fined $5,000 this week for cross-checking Philadelphia Flyers defenseman Andrew McDonald during NHL game number 1218 on Philadelphia on Sunday, April 1st. The incident occurred at 18:55 of the second period. Marchand was assessed a minor penalty for cross-checking on the play. And I saw the replay of this incident, and it wasn't a very good angle because the two players got tangled up along the boards. The Flyers player, Andrew McDonald, fell to the ice. And while he was on the ice, Marchand reached down and basically gave him a cross-check, right to the neck area. And I think what had happened, and you can't see it from the angle, is when McDonald went down, it almost looked like he did, and I'd have to see another angle to confirm it. He almost, I'd be willing to bet, because the Marchand looked like he was reacting or retaliating for something that McDonald did. McDonald hit him clean on the board, so it wasn't that. It was after McDonald went down. One of Marchand's legs was in between McDonald's legs, and I think what he did is close his legs to scissor him up, basically, to tie up Marchand. Marchand was, try to pull his leg out, and McDonald was holding it, and that's when Marchand said, "Oh, you're going to hold my leg? Here." Bam, right in the neck.
Yeah.
The angle doesn't show him holding Marchand's leg, but that's what it looked like to me from the view that I saw of it. Not that it's right to do that, because Marchand's going to get himself in trouble no matter what. And the big frustration I have with Marchand not only is the stuff that he does, I've talked about that before, but I have seen other players do things that I thought was more severe to another player, where it goes completely unquestioned, unanswered, suspended, no fine, no nothing. But because it's Brad Marchand,
yep,
the league is watching his every move on the ice, and they're hitting him every chance they get.
Yep.
So he's basically made himself a marked man. So it's unfortunate, but it's something he's going to have to live with going forward. And let's hope it doesn't cost the Bruins anything big in the future. Because in playoffs, things get even more heated and more testy.
Oh, that's true.
So, and the other suspension or fine we had was another $5,000 fine to Columbus Blue Jackets defenseman Ian Cole, who made a dangerous trip against Vancouver Canucks forward Brandon Sutter during the game in Vancouver on Saturday, March 31st. And that incident occurred at 8:10 of the second period. Cole was assessed a minor penalty for tripping. I didn't see the play, but usually tripping calls or tripping fines come as a result of a slew foot. Not like I said, I didn't see it. I don't know what it was that he did, but usually a trip that's considered dangerous is usually a slew foot.
Right.
So I don't know if you saw it.
I did not see either one of these plays, although I read about them on NHL.com.
Yeah.
So,
okay. All right, so that's all we had for suspensions and fines this week. All right, as to other stories we have coming up, let's talk a little bit about Erik Karlsson. He is not going to be traveling with the Senators for their season-ending 3-game road trip so that he can be with his wife, Melinda, and their family following the loss of their son, Axel. Karlsson had 3 assists in a 6-5 loss to the Winnipeg Jets at Canadian Tire Center on Monday, Ottawa's final home game this season, and picked up the puck after the game ended. Karlsson can become an unrestricted free agent after the 2018-19 season and is eligible to sign a new contract on July 1st. There were rumors surrounding Karlsson's future with the Senators back before the trade deadline passed on February 26th, but no trade happened. He remained with Ottawa. Canadian press is having a field day with this.
Right.
They are going nuts because Karlsson went in and picked up a puck out of the net in their last home game. And they're all going nuts because they think that Karlsson thinks that may be his last game with the Ottawa Senators.
Right.
So what's your thoughts on that one?
Well, we've got 2 players to talk about. Let's also open it up for John Tavares, but let's talk about Karlsson first.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if Eugene Melnick doesn't feel he can afford Erik Karlsson and his salary, then he's got to do something now. He can't wait for the season to start next season and Ottawa start going through that season and Karlsson not signing and other things taking place. Ottawa's not going to make the playoffs and all kinds of problems. So that's a possibility. If it may have already been said to him, we can't afford you. We can't pay you $10 million a season, much less 12, which he might want a contract with that much money. I can understand the Canadian press getting all up in arms, and it may very well be that is his last game. I could see that very clearly. Who do you think would take him?
That's a big question. It's got to be somebody with cap space because it's going to take a monumental it's going to take, like you said, 10, maybe 12 million to get him re-signed. If he's going for the money. It'll be interesting to see. And I agree with you that if Ottawa is going to get anything for him, the most value they're going to get for him is trading him now, or during this particular offseason. Because he's not going to be a free agent this year. He'll be a free agent next year. At the conclusion of his contract.
He'll become a restricted free agent July 1st. I actually looked into that.
Of next year.
July 1st of 2018, he becomes a restricted.
He's a restricted, really?
Yeah. And then in July 1st of 2019, he becomes an unrestricted free agent. So they won't get anything for him then. Unless I miss, maybe I'm thinking about Tavares, but I think that's right.
No, Tavares definitely is unrestricted. Here, let me look
July
it up.
1st. Yeah.
But yeah, the whole thing with Karlsson, obviously the Senators have something there where they absolutely need to get something for him. I just don't know what the Senators can get in return for him that would match what he brings, the Senators. What can you get in return for the best offensive defenseman in the game, arguably?
Right.
That's the big question.
Right.
Carlson is, in fact, going to be an unrestricted free agent at the conclusion of next season. He's not a free agent at all this summer.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, he has one more year in his contract, but it's reported that he wants big money, upwards of $10 million or more when he renews, and if he renews. So,
before we let this go, I'm sorry to hear about his son.
yeah, it happened a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if we mentioned it on the podcast or not.
If we did,
I don't think we did. But yeah, they did end up losing their son. So he took a couple of games off there because of it, and then he came back, and now he's going to take the remainder of the season off. But yeah, the whole Canadian press making a big deal out of Erik Karlsson picking up the puck out of the net and stashing it away. He decided basically put it in his pants to hold on to it till the game was over.
Right.
But they're all reading into it is that Karlsson has played his last game for the Ottawa Senators.
Right. And that listen, Wayne, that may very well be true.
Yep.
I wouldn't go on anything other than talking to a direct source of the Ottawa Senators who may be in the know on a trade that may happen.
But at this point, it's not up to Karlsson to determine whether that was his last game as a Senator. That's up to Ottawa's ownership, because
that's correct.
They hold his rights. He's still in a contract to them for one more season, and the fact that he picked up that puck does not necessarily mean that he definitely has played his last game. He just picked it up in case it is his last game. He doesn't know. He doesn't know what the ownership's going to do there. And Eugene Melnyk is proven to do some crazy things in the past. So yeah, he doesn't know. So he just decided to take it just in case.
Right.
And he's telling people don't read too much more into it than that. It's he wants to stay in Ottawa, but he doesn't know for sure if that's going to happen, if they're going to be able to do it. So anyway,
right.
I just don't see Ottawa getting enough, no matter who he goes to. I don't see them getting enough in return to replace what you get.
Yeah, it's going to be. It's going to be I'm telling you, if you want to pull a team up and talk about them, I mean it might be 2 first-round picks plus a major player in your lineup.
Yeah.
Plus, considerations on other picks. It may be just a huge major trade.
Yeah, it's going to be a difficult trade to make happen for sure.
Yeah.
So, and then with that in mind, let's talk Tavares. He's actually 1 year ahead of Karlsson.
Right.
On that whole contract thing. Tavares will be a unrestricted free agent this summer.
That's right.
And once again, the Canadian press is salivating on where he's going to go, because he just said this week that he's not sure what he wants to do, which tells me he's not 100% sold on staying in New York.
That's exactly what I read into it. If you're looking, even if you're one of those people where you don't even want to consider it until this summer because you've got too much going on and the team is trying to make the playoffs, and that's just the type of player you are, but it's all going to get worked out after you're finished. You would say, well, it's not something that's on my mind right now until about right now, because we've been fighting for a playoff berth. But now that that's not going to happen, I'm looking forward to signing and staying in New York. You could say it that way if that's what you were looking to do. That's not what he said. In fact, he said nothing near close to that. So my feeling really on that one is New York, the Islanders are in trouble. They are going to have to pay him the money. And maybe they've already said that, but he's not relaying that to the press. He's not saying, well, I'm staying here in New York. I'm looking forward to it. He's saying, well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but the fans have been very good here, and I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I'm sure it'll all work out. That's how he's
Yeah.
saying it.
Yep.
And watch us pick up the news tomorrow, and he's signed. But
Yeah.
I just think it doesn't bode well that they are not being more positive about it.
It came across this week is that he's basically looking to leave, and the Canadian press is salivating at the thought of him possibly coming. They all think every press of every Canadian team thinks that he's definitely coming to their. I've been watching all the news coming out of Canada, and the Montreal press and the Montreal fans all think that Tavares is going to sign with them this summer, and the Toronto press and the Toronto fans all think that Tavares is going to go play in Toronto to really make them strong for a Stanley Cup contender. And God help us if he does go to Toronto, because they're going to be a tough team to beat if he does end up there. But basically every Canadian team all thinks that Tavares wants to go to their team. It's funny to watch. And we have no idea where he was gonna want to go. It's just obviously it's got to be a team that can afford him under the cap. He's not going to be a cheap player to get if he does end up on the open market. But I agree with you. I think the Islanders for their foreseeable future, if they want to be a relevant team, they have to find a way to get him signed.
Right. And I don't know what their cap situation is, Wayne.
I think they got plenty of room. I don't think that's an issue.
I don't think it. I haven't looked at it recently, so I don't know. But you would have heard in the articles that I read, well, New York Islanders have cap problems. Then you'd see, well, it's going to be a trade of somebody to get the room to sign him. I haven't read that. So
no, I'm corrected. The Islanders only have a little over $1 million right now of cap space.
Yeah.
But Nikolai Kulemin comes off the books after this season. He makes 4.1. I doubt they'll re-sign him. Certainly not to that number. Let's see, who else do they got? They have to find a way to re-sign Brock Nelson. He's a restricted free agent. Shane Prince, Ross Johnston, Tanner Fritz. I'm sorry, not Tanner Fritz. Chris Wagner, Alan Quinn are all restricted free agents. They're minor players in the grand scheme of things. Calvin DeHaan is an unrestricted free agent. Thomas Hickey is an unrestricted free agent. Dennis Seidenberg, unrestricted free agent. So if they let all those guys go, Seidenberg, Hickey, DeHaan, Wagner, and Kulemin, they will free up probably about $12 million. Yaroslav Halak, 4.5. He's coming off the books. So, and they've got a number of young players that are ready to step in too into the team. So, this team is going to go younger. If Tavares is to remain the Islanders, they will be able to get him signed by letting all these unrestricted free agents go. Probably $15-16 million worth of players about to fall off the books for the Islanders. If they let them all go and not re-sign any of them and fill their spots with some of the younger players that they got in the organization, Kiefer Bellows, Josh Hosang, Eamon McAdam, these are all Devin Taves. These are all players that they've got coming up through that will be on entry-level contracts. And it'll be a much younger team for sure.
Right. And I think a much weaker team when you take the likes of Calvin DeHaan, who's been a veteran player for them. I'm trying to think the other names you mentioned.
Hickey, Seidenberg.
Hickey is Seidenberg. Those are all veteran players.
Halak.
Something tells me they'll keep him. Jarl Halak has single-handedly won games for the Islanders again this year.
But he probably won't be making 4.5.
Yeah.
I don't see that. Because, well, they got Halak signed 4.5. He's unrestricted free agent this summer. But they also got Thomas Greiss signed.
Right.
And he's signed for 3 more years at $3.3 million per year.
Right.
So they may just go with Greiss and a prospect. They may not have a choice.
Yeah. Those are two situations. If I'm a general manager, I don't want any part of them.
Yeah.
If I'm if I'm Garth Snow, I'm not liking what's going to happen now in 2 games.
Yep. And I think ultimately what's going to happen is if Tavares doesn't sign and goes on the open market, I think that may be the final nail in Garth Snow's coffin as far as keeping his job.
Right.
If he ends up losing If he ends up losing Tavares.
I know we're taking up a lot of time on this subject real quickly.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the end of last season when John Tavares had that terrible injury, the hamstring injury.
Yep.
Or the leg injury. Remember that? It was just with a few games left in the season, and they had this picture of him on NHL.com lying, in the prone position on the ice with a terrible look of agony on his face. And you and I know, talked about the terrible ice situation that they have at the Barclays Center.
Yep.
And I don't know that may not matter at all to him. But I know that he had to look at that and say, God, I'm playing on a piece of crap rink. And here I am getting a major injury. I hope they straighten this out,
Yeah.
I only got 1 year to go. But I just remember that was in my mind back then. I was like, God.
Well, it absolutely could be a factor. The building that they play in, I mean, some of these buildings that they have now are amazing. Not only for the fans, but for the players themselves. The facilities that the players have access to,
right?
The lounges and the locker room facility and all that. That's absolutely a factor,
right?
In whether a free agent goes to one team or another. So yeah, every team's trying to put their best foot forward in that case. And
I could see Tavares leaving town, going to a team like Detroit. Couldn't you? I mean, I could see him fitting the role in Detroit real easy. They make something happen for him. I wouldn't be surprised.
But though, and I keep thinking it, that, and I don't expect for a second that this actually will happen. But if we're gonna speculate, Carolina, their new owner is going to want to make a splash this summer in the free agency. And their number one need right now, well, probably 1 and 1A. 1 is goaltending. 2 is the number 1 center. Never know.
Yeah.
If he hits the open market.
If he's willing to pay $10 million, it's going to be $10 million a year for that guy.
Carolina has the cap space.
If they're willing to pay that kind of money without any questions asked about it.
Yep.
You never know, Wayne. You're right.
Yep.
But that's what it's going to take.
Yep.
He's looking at over $10 million a year, Tavares.
Yep.
And I don't know.
He would give Carolina that number 1 center that they desperately need in their lineup. And wow, what a huge improvement that would make the Hurricanes.
Oh, absolutely.
That would instantly make them easily a playoff team.
Absolutely.
Provided they solve their other, 1 and 1A, their other problem is goaltending.
Right.
They would need to solve that, but you can do that via trade.
Yeah. I just get the feeling Tavares is going to go to a team that's on the bubble or that just made the playoffs. I don't see him coming out and going to a Tampa Bay or a Vegas.
No, those teams don't have room for him under the cap.
Yeah. Yeah, and Vegas could probably make it work.
Or Chicago, they got no room.
I don't see it. I see him going to like a Detroit.
Detroit's in cap hell too. I don't see Detroit finding a way to do it.
Yeah,
because of the cap situation there. But yeah, it'll be interesting, and we'll speculate more as the summer approaches, and we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Right.
But yeah, in the meantime, all the Canadian teams think that he's coming to their team, so we'll see. Whether or not he wants to play under the white hot spotlight in either Toronto or Montreal, that's
Yeah, but
lot of players shy away from those two teams just because the spotlight is a little too hot for them.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, but there's Vancouver with a huge need,
Yep.
especially with the Sedins leaving.
Yep.
In comes John Tavares. Calgary. Could you imagine Calgary if they picked up John Tavares?
Yep.
I don't know what their cap situation's like, but that would be they would become an instant major contender in the Pacific.
Yeah, he'll help any team that's even close to being a playoff team right now. He would definitely help bring them over the top for sure.
Yep.
If he ends up leaving. And no offense to Islanders fans, but I like seeing big name players change teams. So I hope he does eventually go somewhere. Just not Montreal or Toronto. Don't want to see that, but. All right, let's talk about Daniel and Henrik Sedin because they did announce their retirement this week from the NHL in a letter that they posted to Canucks fans on the Canucks website. They spoke from the heart together, the article reads. After discussions with their families, it became clear that this would be their last season. It was time for the 37-year-old Twins to focus on homework and birthday parties and kids' activities and family dinners and life after hockey. They decided to break the news now because the Canucks did not make the Stanley Cup playoffs and will finish the season at home against the Vegas Golden Knights on Tuesday and Arizona on Thursday and then at Edmonton on Saturday. And we wanted to share these final 3 games with you, they wrote. We also want to share these games with our families, friends, teammates, coaches, trainers, staff, and everyone at the Canucks who've supported us. You've all been with us every step of the way, and then we want to thank you. The Canucks selected Daniel number 2 and Henrik number 3 in the 99 NHL draft after deft maneuvering by Brian Burke, who was the general manager at the time. They came to North America from Sweden together in 2000-2001. Henrik won the Art Ross Trophy as scoring champion and the Hart Trophy as MVP in the 09-10 season. Daniel won the Art Ross and was runner-up for the Hart the next season. Henrik reached 1,000 points last year. Daniel did it this year. Never before had 2 brothers reached 1,000 points each, let alone 2 on the same team at the same time, let alone identical twins on the same line most of the time. Differences were subtle. Henrik more of a playmaker at center, Daniel more of a finisher on the wing. In the Canucks record book, Henrik is number 1 in games played, assists, and points. Daniel is number 2 in games played, assists, and points. Daniel is number 1 in goals. Henrik is 7th. No, they never won the Stanley Cup. Thanks to their Game 7, they lost 6 and 7 to Boston in the 2011 final. But it says everything about them and their connection to the community that when it came clear the Canucks were no longer contenders late in their careers, they didn't leave it to chase it elsewhere. So they came into the league together. They're going to leave together.
Yeah. And they're going out at the right time. I mean, that was my immediate reaction to this,
Yeah, I think so.
Rather than dragging it out three years down the line, which they probably
through a rebuild. Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, they haven't been playing on the top line anymore this season, really. That started happening more and more where they weren't. The only time they played on the top line is when after Besser went down, really, to injury. But they were using a lot of their younger players on their top line, and these guys were playing second line. So, yeah, I think they're leaving at the right time. The Canucks are going to be on probably a minimum 4-year rebuild before they get back into the playoffs. And, I don't think they want to go through all that.
Yeah, I agree.
So I never was a real big fan of the Sedins, especially since the 2011 Stanley Cup final where, the Bruins played them. Not that they, I don't know. It's not that they weren't dirty players by any stretch. Don't get me wrong there. They just, they were an opponent for the Bruins. So
right
in a pretty major playoff series.
Yeah.
So because of that, I kind of wish we would be able to see what each one of them could do by themselves, though. We never really got to see that.
Right.
They had that one year where they they did the draft at the All-Star game where they, all the players got named to the game, but then they weren't determined to be on a team until the captains drafted the teams. And I think it was the year in Carolina where they actually separated them. One played for the white team, the other played for the dark colored team. Mm-hmm. And that was really the only time that you saw them in different jerseys.
Yeah.
Other than that, their whole entire life, they played on the same team.
Yep.
Same line. And what made them so good is because they played so much together, they knew where each one, was. And that gave them an advantage over all the other players. They just fed off each other so well. And that's what made him such a dangerous player. But they'll be sure to be first ballot Hall of Famers. I don't expect in any way that they're going to have to wait to get in.
Right.
They'll be first ballot. So Canuck fans are trying to. And I guess from what I understand, the tickets for the last home game have gone up like 4 to 5 times what they were before they made this announcement.
Okay.
Which is crazy. So, but that's what happens when two great players decide they're going to retire. And the same thing happened in Pittsburgh when Lemieux announced his retirement both times. Right. So, all right. All right, now a story about the Kraft Hockeyville. Hockey communities across the nation have rallied together to share inspiring stories about their local ice rinks and teams. And now 4 of them are one step closer to the coveted title of Kraft Hockeyville USA 2018. In partnership with the Hockey League Players Association and the NHL, Kraft Heinz is searching for America's most spirited and passionate hockey community. With nominations narrowed to 4 finalists, top contenders are now encouraging their fans to show support and take part in public voting, which begins at 12 Eastern on April 13th and extends through April 14th at 11 a.m. The winner will be announced live on NBCSN later that day. Each of the 4 finalists will receive funds for rink upgrades from Kraft Heinz, with the grand prize winner awarded the opportunity to host an NHL preseason game and receive $150,000 in rink upgrades. Finalists were selected based on story content and their community's total digital rally points, which were awarded for activities such as uploading photos and videos, tweeting from the community page, and interacting in the community content gallery at crafthockeyville.com. The 4 communities advancing to the public voting round are Brandon Valley in Brandon, South Dakota, Clinton Arena in Clinton, New York, George's Pond at Hirsch Coliseum, Shreveport, Louisiana, and Memorial Sports Center in Middlebury, Vermont. And thank God there's no Pennsylvania teams this year.
Yeah.
Because they've won the last 2 Pittsburgh area arenas.
Yep.
So maybe we won't see Pittsburgh Penguins in the Kraft Hockeyville game.
Wouldn't that be something if it's the pond down in Shreveport, Louisiana?
That would be interesting. Who would you put in that game? Dallas and
maybe the Nashville Predators.
Dallas and Nashville? Yeah, who knows? My personal pick is Memorial Sports Center in Middlebury, Vermont, though, because I grew up in Vermont. I played in just about every rink that Vermont had at the time. Although this place, I looked it up, this place I did not play at because it wasn't built until 1993, which was a couple of years after I got out of high school. So obviously I didn't get a chance to play at this Middlebury rink, but I have played at the older rinks that Middlebury has, and including the one at the Middlebury College there. And then, so because I'm grew up in Vermont, that one instantly became my personal favorite. So I'm pushing everybody to go vote for the Middlebury, Vermont rink.
I hear you.
That one will definitely have Montreal as one of the teams playing in it. I can guarantee if the Middlebury, Vermont rink plays, Montreal will be in the Kraft Hockeyville game, unless they exclusively or exclude Canadian teams, because there's a Kraft Hockeyville in the USA. And there's also a Kraft Hockeyville Canada. So if one of the Eastern Canadian rinks wins the Kraft Hockeyville Canada, Montreal will probably play in that, and they probably wouldn't do both. But I just happen to know from personal experience that in the Burlington, Vermont, all the way down through Middlebury, that whole western Lake Champlain edge of the state of Vermont is about 50-50 Boston, Montreal fans there. Because you're only, Burlington, Vermont is only about hour to 90 minutes, depending on how long it takes you to cross the border, drive from Montreal. It's not that far. So there's a ton of Montreal fans in that part of the state. That's why I say if Montreal's not involved in the Canadian Hockeyville game, they will be involved in the Vermont one. Mm-hmm. So Montreal fans, vote for the Middlebury, Vermont rink because that's your best chance of seeing them play. The Brandon, South Dakota, you're going to see two Western teams. The Clinton, New York, I wouldn't be surprised. Rangers, Buffalo would be involved in that one. Louisiana, it'll be two Southern teams. I'm thinking, you said Nashville, I said Dallas, maybe both. Because they usually take, teams that are close by to those rinks. The South Dakota game, you may see probably Minnesota and St. Louis, maybe. Probably.
Yeah. Chicago, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. The NHL likes their Chicago, although with the season they had, maybe they'll they won't use Chicago as often.
Winnipeg. Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah. So it will be interesting to see who wins, and I'm not sure if they've announced the finalists for Craft Hockeyville Canada yet, but we'll have that if and when they talk about it. All right, let's move on to honors milestones. Vegas Golden Knights center William Karlsson, Arizona Coyotes goaltender Antti Ranta, and Buffalo Sabres center Jack Eichel have been named NHL's 3 stars for the week ending April 1st. So, with that, 2 of those players are on teams that are out of the playoffs and are basically have nothing to lose, but they're Eichel and Ranta had great weeks regardless. Ranta had a great week, .964 save percentage, 3 wins and a shutout.
Yeah.
So that'll put pressure on Arizona to re-sign him because he's a unrestricted free agent after this year. All right, Washington Capitals forward Alex Ovechkin played in his 1,000th game on Sunday. He leads the NHL with 45 goals this year, and he scored 603 goals and 1,118 points in those 1,000 games. He's the first Capitals player to reach 1,000 games with the team. Also playing in his 1,000th game, Brent Seabrook played in his 1,000th game when Chicago hosted the Winnipeg Jets at United Center on Thursday. It's been quite a career for Seabrook, who's won the Stanley Cup 3 times, won a gold medal with Canada at the 2010 Olympics, and is an assistant captain with the Blackhawks. He's the 5th player in Chicago franchise history to reach that 1,000-game milestone. And then the final honors for this week is Vegas Golden Knights honored the victims of the tragic Harvest Music Festival shooting back on October 1st. The team raised a banner to the rafters with the names of each victim and 58 stars to represent the lives lost.
Yeah, that was very touching.
The top of the banner reads Vegas Strong. The team also announced that no Golden Knights player will ever wear number 58 in honor of the victims. It is officially retired. So, first retired number for the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, and that was well done. That really was. I looked at the banner. It's beautiful.
Yep.
It's just solemnly thought of right now, I guess, by myself and others, just with what happened. But
yep. Even though it happened back in October, it's still raw, and it's still, it's a big part of Vegas's. It's a big part of their season, really.
Yep. Yep.
So, all right, let's move on to the power ranking for this week, and I believe it's my turn.
It is your turn, Wayne.
All right.
And before you say it,
yep,
you nailed it. I studied this before we went on air tonight. You nailed it. You really did nail it.
All right, so I'm going to start at number 18 this week because everything below 18, those teams are all eliminated from playoff contention. And like I did last week, I put every team that has no chance of making the playoffs at the bottom of the power rankings. So everybody from 19 through 31, they're all the teams that have been eliminated. We know who they are. We talked about them earlier in the year. So at number 18, coming in, I've got Florida. who's basically on life support right now for playoffs. So I put them at number 18. Number 17, I got St. Louis. Number 16, I've got Colorado. So those three teams right there are all equally on life support for playoff contention. Number 15, I've got Philly. Number 14, New Jersey. Number 13, Atlanta. At number 12, I've got the lowest ranked team that's already clinched a playoff spot, and that's Pittsburgh. Number 11, I've got Los Angeles. Number 10, Columbus. Number 9, and everybody from 9 through 1 has clinched playoffs. 9, I've got San Jose. Number 8, I've got Minnesota. Number 7, I've got Toronto. Number 6 is Washington, who's actually clinched their division. Number 5, I've got Vegas, who's clinched their division. Number 4, I've got Winnipeg. Number 3, I've got Boston. Number 2, I've got Tampa Bay. And number 1, I've got Nashville. And I would have put Boston at number 2. However, that 4-0 loss to Tampa Bay slid them back below Tampa Bay. So even though Boston is technically in first place, Tampa Bay, I think, is still, if they were to play each other in the playoffs, is going to be the odds-on favorite to win that series. So that's my power rankings for the week.
Very good.
All right, let's take a look ahead at what is coming up this week. And it's actually going to be a fairly slow week on the ice because we're coming right down to the end of the season. Boston is going to be at Florida on Thursday night. They're going to be at home versus Ottawa on Saturday, and then at home against Florida on Sunday, and that's it for the regular season for the Bruins. Carolina is going to be at Philly on Thursday and at home against Tampa Bay on Saturday, and that ends their season.
Mm-hmm.
And the Rangers?
The Rangers are at the Islanders tomorrow night at the Barclays Center, and then they are at the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia on the 7th, and that's a matinee game, the final game of the season for the New York Rangers.
So, yeah, Carolina and Rangers have their seasons coming to the end. Boston has basically there are a few warm-up games to get ready for the playoffs.
That's right.
And the playoffs will probably start Wednesday. I don't think I've seen an official announcement yet, but that's usually when they start.
I saw a commercial. They do start on Wednesday the 11th.
Wednesday the 11th, okay. So
Yep.
I'm hoping that Boston doesn't have to play Wednesday since they're one of the only teams in the league that, them and Florida are playing on Sunday. So every other team will have an extra day's rest over Boston. I would hope that Boston will start their first game on Thursday to kind of even up the day's rest with them and the other teams. But we'll see. No official announcements have been made. Of course, they can't because we don't know who's playing who yet. Even though we only have 5 days left in the season,
Right.
Everything is still completely up in the air as to who's playing who. I actually looked at it, and there's only 3 teams that their position in the standings are locked in, and one is Toronto. Another one's Washington. They're locked in at that number 1 spot. And the other one's Vegas, who's locked into their number 1 spot. Everybody else, their seeding could change between now and Saturday.
Yeah, it's wide open.
So as far as who's playing who is wide open remaining of the year, even though there's only 5 games left or 5 days left. And really, most teams only have 2 games left, so it's coming right down to it. All right, let's move on to the Minor League Hockey Minute. You have a couple of KHL stories. I have a couple of American Hockey League stories.
Right.
So let's start with the American Hockey League.
Okay.
And the American Hockey League earlier this week announced their all-rookie team for 2017-18. And the players are at goaltender Ville Husso of the San Antonio Rampage. Philip Hronik of the Grand Rapids Griffins is the first defense player. Sami Niku is the other defenseman for the Manitoba Moose. The forwards are Mason Appleton with the Manitoba Moose, Daniel Sprong with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, and Dylan Strome with the Tucson Roadrunners. Now, why is this relevant, you say? Well, I happen to have a list of players who at some point in the past have also been named to this AHL all-rookie team. See if you recognize any of these names. Zdeno Chara, Daniel Briere, Dan Boyle, Ron Hainsey, Jason Spezza, Antoine Vermette, Cam Ward, Thomas Vanek, Rene Bourque, Kevin Bieksa, Jimmy Howard, Dan Girardi, Mike Green, Yaroslav Halak, Troy Brower, Ryan Callahan, Bobby Ryan, Brian Boyle, Alex Goligoski, Justin Abelkader, John Carlson, PK Subban, Logan Couture, Lars Eller, Eddie Lack, Corey Conacher, Tyler Johnson, Gustav Nyquist, Justin Schultz, Sammy Vatanen, Jason Zucker, Tyler Toffoli, Ryan Strome, Ryan Spooner, Matt Murray, Connor Brown, Victor Arvidsson, Charles Houdon, Ryan Pollock, UC Saros, Brandon Montour, and the list goes on and on and on. So yeah, we may not know a lot of these names in this year's all-rookie team, but I'd be willing to bet that a couple of these guys will be household names here in a few years.
Absolutely. Very interesting, too, by the way. I hadn't heard of any of those players, but it was very interesting.
Yep.
No, I think I heard about every single one of them. I knew who they were.
Oh, the previous selections. Yep. So, yeah. And the other one I wanted to just touch on real quick with the American Hockey League was to get an update on playoffs. As of right now, and the American League has actually another week after this one in their regular season. So their regular season finishes a week later than the NHL. Now, the first round of the playoffs in the American League is the reason they can go an extra week in their regular season is round one is a best of 5. It doesn't go best of 7 like the NHL does. So they wrap up round one in a best of 5. So they've got an extra week. Most teams have either 5 or 6 games remaining. Only the Hershey Bears have just 4 games remaining. Everybody else is 5 or 6 between now and the end of the regular season. And at this point, most of the games are being played Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. And a lot of times, teams are playing 3 games in 3 nights. Something you don't see in the NHL.
Yep.
That happens a lot in the American League. But as of right now, in the East, there are 5 teams that have clinched playoff spots, and we went over this last week. It's just a clear, straight up 4 teams from every division make the playoffs. So in the Atlantic Division, just Lehigh Valley have clinched. Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, and Providence and Charlotte are the other 3 teams currently sitting in playoff spots. In the North, Toronto, Syracuse, Rochester, and Utica have all clinched playoff spots. So that division is sealed up. All that remains is who's going to play who. And in the West, it's still wide open. Tucson Roadrunners are the only team that have clinched a playoff spot out west. Every other spot is wide open. So that's my quick American Hockey League playoff update, and we'll get more details as we get closer to the regular season ending. So they've got 2 more weeks in their regular season.
Yes.
All right. You wanted to talk about the KHL.
I had actually 2 KHL stories because both of them were very short. But Wayne, have you seen, and I don't know whether you call them AK bars or AK bars, Kazan?
I think it's AK bars, I think.
AK bars is how I have called them. And their jerseys are really cool. I think they're pretty neat looking. If you take a look at an AK bars Kazan jersey and you're one of our listeners, you go in the KHL, en.khl.ru. You can see Justin Acevedo, who is the big player for the AK bars Kazan team right now, and he's actually having a great playoffs run for them. But my first article is actually regarding Justin Acevedo, and it's entitled Justin Acevedo's Century. Goes this way. Well, okay, sometimes it's just about Justin Acevedo scoring goals. The Akbars Kazan forward celebrated his 30th birthday on Sunday and did so in some style. He grabbed a goal and an assist to help his team turn around a 2-0 deficit at home to Traktor and win 4-3. Along the way, he notched his 100th KHL goal and moved on to 18 points for this year's playoffs, top of the scoring charts, and closing in on his personal best from 2014. And as you know, Wayne, Akbars is one of the best teams in the KHL, if you looked at teams who have won the Gagarin Cup, they've actually won it twice. In the first two seasons, the first two inaugural seasons, they won in 2009 and in 2010, the first two seasons of the KHL. So they are a successful team in that league, and could very well wind up in the Gagarin Cup again this season. Wouldn't be surprised, particularly with Justin Azevedo. So that was my first article. And the second one is in regards to two teams that were basically bit the dust as a result of the board of directors meetings in the KHL last week. And I just wanted to quickly touch on them.
Yeah.
Because two teams will be leaving, and the KHL will be actually shrunk down to 25 teams at the start of next season. And then the second article is titled Ugra and Lada Leave the League. As part of a planned meltdown in the number of teams competing in the KHL, two clubs will not be playing in next season's competition. Ugra Kanti Manzizic, which I don't think any of us have talked about.
Nope.
And Lada Togliatti received the news at last week's meeting of the league's directors. The decision was based on a combination of factors, both on and off the ice, and the two clubs were ranked lowest among the 27 teams that played this season based on performance, financial, and attendance indicators. Initially, the KHL intended to cut 3 teams this summer. However, Severstal Sharapovits earned a reprieve. The Steelmen ranked 25th out of 27, but a run at this year's playoffs persuaded the officials to allow another year to see if the team's progress could be maintained. As a result of 2 teams leaving the Eastern Conference, Torpedo Nizhny Novgorod, Torpedo, will switch to play in the East next season. So, and I'm not sure, is Torpedo in it right now with Akbars? I'm not quite. I think they are. I think it's Akbars and Torpedo.
Yeah, Torpedo earned the 5th seed in the regular season in the West. And no, Torpedo is out because they're still in the West.
It's Tractor.
Yeah, it's Tractor. Yep. Tractor and Akbars in the East, and the 2 Army teams, CSKA and SKA in the West. And that series is tied up at 2 currently.
Yeah.
So, but as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, a lot of people feel that this whole season is fixed to allow SKA to win. So we'll see if that comes true. I'm rooting for CSKA to knock off SKA because I don't think I think this is the Gagarin Cup final right here. The 2 teams in the West, the Western Conference final, because I don't think either team in the East stands a chance against whoever comes out of the West in the Gagarin Cup final. So. But, yeah, it's coming right down to it. By this time next week, it will be in the middle of the Gagarin Cup final. So, all right. Good deal. Let's move on to college hockey. And there isn't much to talk about because nothing happened last week. 2 weeks ago, we had the Frozen Four, the semifinal. But they step out of the way for the basketball Final Four for that. So they take not quite 2 weeks off because the regional finals all took place on Saturday and Sunday. Well, the national semifinal games actually take place tomorrow night, Thursday night. So if you're anywhere near an ESPN, I think it's ESPN2 that's got the semifinal games. Tomorrow night are the 2 semifinal games in NCAA college hockey. And, of course, I'm rooting for a Michigan-Ohio State championship game, but my mind says it's going to end up being Notre Dame and Minnesota Duluth because both teams are playing very, very well right now. But it comes right down to it. It's going to be Minnesota Duluth, Ohio State at 5 p.m. Central on ESPN2 tomorrow night. That's, 6 p.m. our time?
Right.
And 8:30 Central or roughly an hour after the conclusion of the first game because, if that game goes to overtime, they play traditional overtimes in the NCAA. There's no shootout. There's no... 3-on-3. It's 5-on-5. Play till someone scores. Play till someone wins. and I've seen these games go 2-3 overtimes quite frequently in the past. So 5 p.m. is the first game. 8:30 is the scheduled start of the second game, or 9:30 Eastern. And then the winners of the two games tomorrow night will play Saturday night at 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern on ESPN, the mothership. So I'll be watching. I don't know about you.
Yes, I will definitely be watching. It's gonna be great to see the semifinals this year.
Yep, it'll be a fun time. So that's all I have for college hockey. So let's move on to our picks of the week. And you've got one about a Penguins fan seeking a kidney donor.
Yes.
And I've got one about an emergency goalie entering the game for the Chicago Blackhawks.
And I gotta say, Wayne, that is a great story. Why don't you let me get mine out of the way first?
All right.
And that way we can, because yours is really good, and I know about that. So I've read it and I know about it. So let me go ahead and get mine out of the way. This actually grabbed at me yesterday when I was doing my study for today's podcast. It's actually I've never heard of something like this before happening, but certainly wish this lady all the best. And I wanted to read the article and bring to light what's going on in her life. Penguins fan seeks kidney donor, brings homemade sign to game. Kelly Sawatsky's simple, polite request for help goes viral. Kelly Sawatsky needs a new kidney and is trying to get the word out. She sought some help from the Pittsburgh Penguins and their fans on Saturday. Sawatsky brought a handmade sign stating her need and containing her phone number, and it became a viral sensation after the Penguins shared it during their game against the Montreal Canadiens at PPG Paints Arena. I thought it'd be a great idea to make a sign, Sawatsky told NHL.com. I didn't want to put it out there, but you can't gamble with your life. I need help. Sawatsky received more than 30 calls and messages on her phone and countless other messages via social media after the Penguins' Twitter account shared it. It was Sawatsky's second attempt at getting a kidney at an NHL game this season, the first coming during the Penguins' game against the New Jersey Devils on February 3rd, but the attempt Saturday was more widely received. I had the feeling when I took the sign to PPG Paints Arena, something good would come of it, Sawatsky said. The outreach has been just incredible. The words thank you just don't even begin to cover it. Sawatsky's kidney function has dropped from 75% a year ago to roughly 10%, which has landed her on a potential transplant list. Sawatsky will turn 31 in May, and the waiting list for a new organ is about 5 years. With her function dropping, plus college graduation in May, and a wedding she is engaged to a gentleman named Tyler Hart, set for May 2019, she decided to put her situation out there. Her kidney failure is the result of an infection that turned septic and caused a lengthy hospital stay from December 2015 to January 2016, she said. The infection attacked Sawatsky's lungs, and she stopped breathing December 27th, 2015. She was on a ventilator for 12 days before the infection attacked her kidneys. Sawatsky had to relearn to walk, and her muscles atrophied from her time on bed rest. She spent about 8 weeks in the hospital. Sawatsky was forced to take a semester off from studying to become an elementary school teacher at Millersville University in Pennsylvania. She met Hart while on break, and he got her into the Penguins. Following the Penguins and their success has been a distraction for Sawatsky during her illness. I just love the team. I love watching them, she said. There are so many games, and there's always something going on with them. It's fun. It's something my fiance and I enjoy doing together. So I put this out there on our podcast. I said those wishing to help Sawatsky can also email a kidney for Kelly at gmail.com. It's rather a touching story, and I certainly wish her well. I know organ donors and stuff like that is, it's you hear about it all the time, that it's not just something where you walk in a hospital and get an organ donation and everything works out. There's a lot of stuff involved. So
yeah, it's not like they keep them in a fridge somewhere. No,
that's right. That's right. So we wish her all the best.
Yeah. Yeah. So do I. So, well, good. Well, I have one about, and I debated whether or not we should lead the show with this story because it was such a big story at the time. This literally happened, what, a couple of hours after we finished recording last week's
That
podcast. So
that sounds right.
This is a week old story by now, but it's still an amazing story nonetheless. I just need to pull it up here. I lost it. Here it is. All right. So, and this is a story on NHL.com, no specific author. It says, Scott Foster lived every amateur athlete's dream on Thursday. It was also kind of a nightmare. Foster, a 36-year-old accountant from Oak Park, Illinois, got his chance to play in an NHL game, something he never thought would happen while playing at Western Michigan University. It certainly wasn't something he thought would ever happen as he played rec league hockey for the past decade. But hey, you never know. And a quote from him, they said, "Who would have thought? You just keep grinding away in the men's league, and everybody, eventually you get your shot," Foster joked after he became the story of the night in the NHL last Thursday. He stopped all 7 shots he faced to help the Blackhawks, who lost scheduled starting goalie Anton Forsberg during warm-ups, and backup Colin Delia with 14 minutes left in the third period, hold on for a 6-2 victory against the Winnipeg Jets. One of those shots came in a terrifying fashion off the stick of Jets defenseman Dustin Byfuglien, who at 6'5" and 260 pounds is a large man even by NHL defenseman standards. Foster, who copped to nerves but said he blacked out after being told he had to suit up, had a strategy. "You just kind of brace yourself and hope for the best. He's a big man and he can shoot the puck," Foster said. When Foster was pressed into duty, Blackhawks coach Joel Quenneville could be seen chuckling to himself on the bench as Foster passed him to head out onto the ice. "I think I would laugh too," Foster said. I'm an accountant by day. A few hours ago, I was sitting on the computer typing on a 10 key. Every emergency backup goalies, or E-bugs, as they are sometimes called around the league, are just your average person with some hockey playing experience. They commonly attend games in case a team suffers from bad luck. But right before Thursday, only one E-bug had actually appeared in action. George Alves of the Carolina Hurricanes, who was an equipment manager for the team and entered a game on New Year's Eve of 2016 for the final 10 seconds. This was quite a different situation. It's funny. You think there'd be a lot of pressure, but really, tomorrow I'm going to wake up, I'm going to button up my shirt, and I'm going to get back to my day job, Foster said. So what pressure is there for me? "What a moment," Quenneville said. "I had never met him before. I talked to him before the game. Nice kid. Opening day for baseball, but we had to go to the bullpen a couple times today. One of those interesting things you don't see very often. Both goalies played extremely well." Foster now has the story to share with his wife and 2 children, ages 5 and 2, not to mention his colleagues in the office. Foster said they may hear a different version of things, however. And the quote from him says, "I made about 30 saves in a 1-0 win," he joked. For his efforts, the number 90 was named first star of the game and awarded the team's belt in the locker room. It all came during a game when Foster was the second Blackhawks goalie to make his NHL debut after Delia. It also happened to be the night that defenseman Brent Seabrook was honored for playing in 1,000 games. Foster is just now 999 short of his new teammate, and he had the United Center fans chanting his name in the final minutes. "I'm going to remember this one for a long, long time," Foster said. So, and there's several articles surrounding this story that were on NHL.com and basically around the hockey world, because it's something we joke about in the leagues that I referee in, and the leagues I play in is, we live close enough to an NHL rink where one of the goalies that I see on a regular basis could potentially have this happen to them. Although Carolina does use George Alves as their emergency backup goalie, they could potentially use one of these other guys that I see on a regular basis at the local rinks, because they may want Alves to do his other job, which, his day job, quote unquote day job, is being one of the equipment managers for the Canes. So if he had to suit up for another team, they might possibly go with somebody else other than Alves for the other team, because the emergency goalie, the way that works by rule is, every team has to provide an emergency goalie that can suit up for either team on any given night. And this guy, Scott Foster, had been to about 10 to 15 games earlier this year as the emergency backup goalie. And he says usually he goes to the game, he throws his gear in a closet somewhere in the arena, and then he goes up to the press box and watches the game from up there. He does, and that's the life of the emergency backup goalie most times. In this case, the Blackhawks' first goalie got hurt doing the little soccer game that many teams do before they go out for warm-ups, just to get the players warmed up. Well, he hurt himself there, and then the other goalie hurt himself in the game itself.
Right.
So he got forced into action, and he ended up having to play 14 and a half minutes. So and in that game, I do remember, and we talked about it at length, the George Alves game. He went in for 10 seconds of a game, and I think the game, if I remember right, was either 8-2 or 7-2 or something like that. The Canes were losing. I mean, it's a totally different situation. They just put him in just to give him that moment, right?
Right.
Well, Foster has to go in and actually play and face shots, and he faced 7 shots, stopped them all. And some of those saves were kind of ugly looking, but he looked a lot like the beer league goalies that I see on a weekly basis. But he did a great job anyway.
Yeah.
Stopping, the Winnipeg Jets are no slouch of a team either.
No, they're not.
They're one of the best teams in the league, and he ended up stopping. And I guess as word of his appearing in the game got out, back at Johnny's Ice House, the rink that he plays beer league in, I guess he plays for a couple different teams in that building. There were games going on that night, and all those games stopped. And everybody went to the lounge or wherever the big screen TVs are in that rink, either the lounge or the lobby or whatever. And all the players who were playing in games at that moment all stopped to watch him play. So there's a picture on Twitter, or on NHL.com from a Twitter user that took a picture of all the players as they're sitting there watching the games. Or watching Scott Foster play. So real neat story. It's something that you only see in hockey for sure.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because not every, I guess if this starts happening too often, you'll probably see them change the rules, and that NHL teams will start carrying 3 goalies. But for right now, they only carry 2, and you just never know when the 2 goalies are going to get hurt.
That's right.
So, all right, that is it.
Very good story, Wayne. That's an excellent one.
So, and that brings us to the end of this week's show. Yeah. And sadly, it is our last show of the regular season. Next week, we've got a lot to do next week.
Oh, yeah.
The regular season will be over, so there won't be much to talk about. Only 5 days worth of games to talk about, so we'll blow through that real quick. Most of next week's show will be our playoff preview. This is where you and I will fill out our brackets. We will make our picks as to who we think is going to win the cup this year.
Yep. A fun show, too. A lot of fun.
It always is a fun show to see our picks and see who we think is going to win. So I will be studying the teams this week, and I will be making sure that I get myself prepared for that show. So hopefully I can make better picks than I did last year. Last year, I can seem to remember I didn't do so hot because there's always upsets, and it's just a matter of which games end up as upsets, or which series end up as upsets, because you just never know. I mean, it's happened quite often in recent years where a number 8 seed ends up going all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. So. That's the great thing about a 30-team league now, a 31-team league, soon to be 32, is that making the playoffs is not an easy thing to do, and every team in the playoffs is good now.
Oh yeah. In fact, there's going to be 2 or 3 good teams that don't make it.
Yep. There's going to be 2 or 3 good teams that don't make it, and there's going to be a few really good teams that get bounced in the first round. So,
yeah.
So we will have by this time next week, because if the playoffs start on the 11th, that's a week from tonight. So we will come back to record either Wednesday night or Thursday night. We're not sure which yet. If we do Wednesday, it'll have to be early because I've committed to referee 1 game at 9 o'clock Wednesday night. So if we do it next Wednesday, we'll have to get out of the way early. But other than that, we'll do it on Thursday or maybe even Friday if our weeks pan out that way. We just don't know until we get within a day or two of recording whether or not, which night we're going to do, because it all depends on our work schedules. So
that's right.
So with that, we'll go ahead and end it, and stay tuned next week as we do our playoff preview. And until then, we'll see you next week, Steve.
Wayne, have a great week. Enjoy the college hockey tournament coming on, and I look forward to working with you again next week.
Will do. All right. Have a good week now.
Good night.
All right. All right.
That was good.
Yep.
That was very good. Yep.
So, yeah, next week. Next week we'll be in the playoffs. That's great. Scary.
Yep. It's hard to believe. I feel melancholy.
We may even have to record Tuesday night if we want to get a true playoff preview out of the way.
Yep.
we could look at that.
Yep. I could do. Yesterday was not possible for me because I had actually a dental appointment. Plus the Rangers played last night, and I wanted to watch the game. But
yeah,
I could do that next week.
Well, no games to get in our way next Tuesday. So.
No games at all. So I could study on Monday and Tuesday and be ready, possibly.
And I don't know what my reffing schedule is for. For next week. Let me see what it is real quick. Reffing. Because I ref last night, or this past Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, next, I don't ref again until, what's today? Today's the 4th, right?
Today's the 4th, yep, April 4th.
Yeah, I ref on the 8th. And then I ref on the 11th, but that's all I have next week for reffing. And it's just that 1 game at like 9 o'clock at night. Then I don't ref again until the 17th. So,
right.
So yeah, Tuesday would definitely work on that sense.
Right.
And I don't believe I have inventory next week. No, I don't have inventory.
Right.
So yeah, all that potentially could work for a Tuesday night.